Welcome to Executive Insights for Life Sciences Innovators, and thanks for joining us today. On this podcast, we'll explore leadership, innovation, and growth in the life sciences sector. I'm Don Alexander, founder of GeneCoda, a boutique executive search firm dedicated to connecting visionary leaders with life sciences companies shaping the future of therapeutics and scientific tools. On each episode, we'll dive into candid conversations with industry pioneers, uncovering strategies, insights, and real-world experiences that drive success in our industry. If you're interested in presenting as a guest of a future episode, please scan the barcode image at the top of my video frame and follow the instructions. Now I'm pleased to be joined by Dr. Anna Kazanchyan, the CEO of Saghmos Therapeutics. Anna Kazanchyan, MD, has more than 25 years of experience as a senior executive in the biopharmaceutical and healthcare finance industries, including marquee Wall Street firms and as an entrepreneur. She has a unique combination of clinical medicine, equity research, business, clinical, and regulatory strategy, as well as business development expertise and experience. Dr. Kazanchyan has served as a member of the board of directors and compensation committee for publicly traded biopharma companies and also serves as a coach for the Women in Bio's Boardroom Ready initiative. Dr. Kazanchyan is the founder and CEO of Saghmos Therapeutics. Dr. Kazanchyan was founder and managing partner of Primary Eye Research, where she was a strategic advisor to CEOs of biopharmaceutical companies on business development, regulatory strategy, marketing, and commercial competitive landscape, as well as equity and debt financing. She's also provided due diligence to leading healthcare investment funds and evaluated investment prospects of biopharmaceutical companies based on the scientific, clinical, regulatory, and commercial outlook for said products. Previously, Dr. Kazanchyan was Senior Biotechnology Analyst at Wells Fargo and was a member of the institutional investor-ranked biotechnology equity research teams at Goldman Sachs and Citi. She received a medical doctor degree from Harvard Medical School. Anna, welcome to today's podcast.
Thank you, Don. Pleasure to join you.
Thank you so much. Well, let's dive right in, Anna. Let's talk a little bit about your career journey and your leadership philosophy. So, what inspired your journey from clinical drug development and investment into leading now Saghmos Therapeutics?
Sure. So I received my MD from Harvard Medical School and started a career on Wall Street, as you mentioned, working at Goldman Sachs, Citi, and Wells Fargo as a biotech equity research analyst. And it was amazing to see the big picture in drug development in the pharmaceutical industry, everything from preclinical to clinical to approval to marketing and various competitive dynamics. So that in itself was absolutely fascinating and exciting. However, my move into developing the medicine that we're currently developing at Saghmos Therapeutics has more of a personal basis. My father, when he was 54 years young, he underwent a percutaneous coronary intervention, stents placed in his to open up his blocked heart arteries, and he suffered acute kidney failure due to contrast dyes. So at the age of 54, he ended up on dialysis, which is essentially a death sentence. Typically, those patients live somewhere between 5 to 7 years absent kidney transplant. And unfortunately, my father, after many episodes of heart attacks and heart failure and various hospitalizations, he passed away when he was only 59 years young. And at that point in time, I was still at Harvard Medical School, and I made it my mission to reinvent a medicine, to repurpose a medicine that would help prevent others from suffering the same horrible fate that befell my father. So when I came across a medicine after looking at evaluating and discounting hundreds of such medicines over the course of my career on Wall Street and afterwards, I embarked on the journey as an entrepreneur to develop the medicine at Saghmos Therapeutics.
That's great, Anna. many people that we speak of, they have a personal story behind their journey, and I appreciate you sharing that with us today about your father. Can you share pivotal moments in your career that have helped shape your leadership style?
Absolutely. So, leadership is always by example, and leadership is about building a community of like-minded individuals that contribute different aspects of their expertise to the greater good, to the greater goal. And what I learned in my career journey is that often people talk about culture, but I would reframe it and say it's more about philosophy, what philosophical principles underlie what you're looking to accomplish at the company. And our philosophy at Saghmos Therapeutics is that we are developing a medicine. We are not developing an empire in the sense that it's not the number of individuals that work there, it's the number and quality of individuals that work there and how you go about building a resilient company. So we have about 40 individuals and entities working with us around the world, from manufacturing to PK to preclinical studies to regulatory to CMC. And all of those are on demand. I mean, as a startup company, it was very important for us to make sure that we're very efficient in looking at how we develop the medicine in the most efficient manner. And everyone that joined our team in the very beginning, they joined it based on equity consideration only. So that became a self-selection process, if you would. And also leading by example. So everyone makes mistakes, as do I. And when hiccups happen and when mistakes happen, one has to be very supportive of each other in a team environment. And that's what builds ultimately trust and reliance on each other and achievement of great goals that others may or may have not considered to be either difficult to achieve or impossible.
Absolutely. That's great, Anna. You've got an interesting background, as we described earlier, from Wall Street to biotech founder, and I'm curious what unique challenges you faced so far, I suppose, as a biotech founder now of Saghmos.
So, interesting question. Thank you, Don. So, when you're a biotech equity research analyst, you're essentially an entrepreneur in the sense that you are the brand, you have people and within the investment bank that are supporting you, but essentially you have to be very entrepreneurial because no one tells you or can tell you what you should be covering or how you should be covering it or what to do. And essentially it's up to you how you can build that reputation and the mark that you leave in the minds of investors. I mean, I still have investors that have worked with me, decades ago, who still remember some of my calls, investment calls that I made at the time. But what's also very unique about that is that you really get to see the big picture. You get to see hundreds, if not thousands, of products are being developed, and then you also see the best practices, and more importantly, the mistakes and often repeated mistakes that are made. So, from that perspective, that was a highly, highly valuable experience that in many ways helped me avoid some of the challenges that your sort of typical biotech entrepreneur, someone who's a scientist or an MD, and they leave their academic institution and they start a company around a discovery, and then they have to quote unquote discover all the challenges along the way and potentially repeat some of the mistakes that could have been, avoided. I mean, to me, personally and professionally, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So maybe it's not surprising that I'm actually developing preventive medicine for preventing damage to the kidneys. So I would say that's one of the challenges, not seeing or not knowing the big picture and avoiding the common pitfalls. And obviously, it takes time. It takes money if you have to go back to the drawing board. But even with all of that, I mean, there were multiple challenges that we encountered along the way. I mean, I'll just highlight two. We were in discussions with an ex-US company for manufacturing our product, and after 6 months of a lot of effort and a lot of money invested, they suddenly came back to us at the very end of the process and said, well, their API provider, active pharmaceutical ingredient provider, last minute decided that they do not wish to file a drug master file with the FDA, which means that we could not use that particular manufacturer to manufacture our clinical supply or even, be our commercial supply down the road. So we had to go back to the drawing board and start a search for a new manufacturing partner and do that. I mean, the other example was when our clinical supply was put on stability. It was literally the day off or the day before, actually, the day before there were lockdowns due to the pandemic in India. And it needed to be checked within a particular period of time. And thankfully, the lockdown was lifted before it had to be checked. But if it wasn't lifted, then we literally had to go back to the drawing board again. So my advice to companies, to entrepreneurs is there should be two sets of expectations. One is internal and the other one is external. Internal expectations should always be very ambitious, very exciting, challenging. External communication of those expectations should be different in the sense that assume that everything's going to take 1.5 to 2 times longer, and 1.5 to 2 times is going to cost more money, 1.5 to 2 times more money. So, those are some of the lessons that we learned and relearned during this process.
Absolutely. Everything is twice as expensive ultimately as you think it's going to be.
Right.
So,
Under promise, over deliver.
I like it. I like it, Anna. That's great. Let's turn to the products that Saghmos is developing, cardiovascular and kidney protection, as you mentioned. Can you explain how trometazidine, this ST62516, works and how it addresses major gaps in treating major adverse cardiac and kidney events?
Absolutely. So there's tremendous unmet medical need in this area. There are currently no approved pharmacological agents anywhere in the world to either prevent or treat these complications. So, and that's something that happened to my father. And when I embarked on the journey to find a drug that could be reinvented for this indication, the principles are very straightforward. What we're looking for was a checklist. The drug has to have a record of safety, has to have proven clinical efficacy, be easy to manufacture, inexpensive to manufacture, and also be administered in a way that would have the greatest impact on the quality of care. And so on the safety front, our medicine is an established cardiovascular medicine. It's been used outside of the US since 1978 for the treatment of stable angina. And so in 2012, the European Medicines Agency performed a comprehensive assessment of its safety, which was published. And there's 40 plus million patient years worth of safety with our medicine. It's probably one of the largest databases for any medicine that's going into not just going to phase 3, but one of the largest databases, ever as far as safety is concerned for a cardiovascular drug. So we check that box, right? So the second one is proven clinical efficacy. As I mentioned, it's an established cardiovascular drug, but in addition to that, there are hundreds of clinical studies, phase 2-like studies and real-world evidence studies that were published in peer-reviewed journals outside of the US, showing that it reduces acute kidney failure somewhere between 60 to 85%, both clinically significant, clinically meaningful, and statistically significant manner. And it also improves heart failure, reduces hospitalizations, reduces heart attacks, reduces death. So that box was also checked, proven clinical efficacy. Small molecule, very easy to manufacture, very inexpensive to manufacture. And because of that, and because it'll be administered in the hospitals, we can give it we can market it very efficiently. 30 salespeople can cover the about 300 interventional cardiology centers that perform the bulk of 1 million procedures that are being performed in the US. Contrast procedures, PCI procedures that are being performed in the US, every year. So that box was also checked. So it was a very, essentially all of it was done with a mind of how can we make sure that our drug has the highest likelihood of success? And it does. And again, once it's approved, it will be the only drug in the world for this particular condition where there are no other approved pharmacological agents.
Absolutely. That's a great overview, Anna. I'm just curious about one thing you mentioned on the commercial, I guess on the commercial side, I believe you said maybe a team of around 30 individuals, basically working with interventional cardio centers. And is that something that you all will be doing, do you think, internally, or do you think you would be partnering with other organizations to, perhaps uh, get that to the patient?
So when one is building a business, I've seen a lot of companies where they, first of all, find the pill and then try to find the ill. And then they say, well, if we build, they will come, right? Pharma companies will come and acquire us. But when the pharma companies don't, then those companies are stuck. Because if you have to build a sales force of hundreds or thousands of primary care salespeople, that's just not something that a biotech company, early stage biotech company can do or can attempt to do. It just requires tremendous resources and expertise and everything else. Now, one of the reasons that we selected this initial indication that could be expanded to include other ones as well is because it can be addressed with a very targeted, very focused sales force. Now, we would be in a position to develop this and to market this on our own. Having said that, because of that, we are in the best position to engage in partnership discussions and acquisition discussions with big pharma companies. I mean, the attractiveness of our asset to pharma companies is very straightforward. There are about $300 billion worth of LOEs coming up just in the next, less than a decade at this point. And there are very few mega blockbuster revenue opportunities available that are late stage, and they address markets where there's no competition now, and there is no competition in the foreseeable future. $9 billion plus in peak revenues annually. That's a very substantial number for any pharmaceutical company. So even though we're in a position to take this all the way through, we are already in discussions with multiple pharmaceutical, biotech, and specialty pharmaceutical companies that have approached us to initiate those discussions.
That's great. Since we're kind of on that subject anyway, I was curious about ST62516's patent protection, I suppose, how the company's protected from a patent standpoint, and how that factors into long-term value for the company.
Sure, absolutely. So, as I mentioned, the product has been available outside of the US for another indication. And when we were developing the product, myself and my co-founder, Dr. Shalini Cornelio, are the primary inventors on the patents, the 2 US patents and one patent in Japan that was issued to the company. So we own our IP free and clear. We do not owe anyone any milestone payments, any royalties. So 100% of economics belongs to Saghmos. Those patents provide us exclusivity through 2037. We are at the beginning of our patent journey because as we generate data, we will be filing additional patents with obviously much later exclusivity dates. But in addition to the patent, and I always think of it as market exclusivity rather than just patents, right?
Mhm.
What is the market exclusivity available to us? And because the drug has never been in the United States, it's never been approved or filed for in the United States for any indication, it is considered a new chemical entity. And it is being developed under the 505(b)(1) pathway. We have that in writing from the FDA. We've done our own preclinical studies. We will be doing our own clinical studies, phase 3 study. And because of that, we will be entitled to 5 years of data exclusivity. What that means is that from the date of the approval of the drug for 5 years, the FDA will not accept any applications for a generic version of our drug. And 5 years and 1 nanosecond later, when they accept it, there's still a 30-month stay. So that gets us to 7.5 years of market exclusivity. Now, let's compare that to orphan drug exclusivity, which is only for 7 years. Obviously, a very sparse patient population. The company needs to reach out to find the doctors, find the patients, and then try to convince them to prescribe exceptionally expensive drugs that are perhaps improve the quality of life, but they're not necessarily life-saving. Now, let's contrast it, pun intended, with our opportunity where 1 million procedures annually, the patients come to the emergency room in the middle of a heart attack, having the worst day of their lives, and they're being offered a medicine. And once it's the standard of care, it will need to be administered to everyone. The interventional cardiology and the cardiologist in the hospital gives them a drug that is safe, that is effective, and they stay on that drug for 90 days at a estimated cost of only $9,000 for a 90-day course of treatment. And that's something that helps them avoid heart attacks, death, hospitalizations, dialysis. So it's a very different commercial uptake as being the only medicine for an indication where it has life-saving potential.
Absolutely. That's great, Anna. Thank you for that. Let me also ask you, so earlier you mentioned a couple of challenges that I'm going to just quickly quantify as supply chain and maybe COVID related, how you had to pivot, I suppose. But I'm curious if there have been other big challenges in bringing ST62516 to two phase 3 trials. Any other challenges that you may have encountered along the way that you think will be worthwhile for the audience to know about?
Sure. So we are at the cusp of starting the phase 3 study once we complete the current round of fundraising. And I mean, it's all about the process, right? Just like with manufacturing, the process is the product when it comes to advancing a company. So dealing with vendors can often be, challenging. Some of them are great, some of them are good, but there are a few out there that, think it's perfectly okay to not be forthcoming or not to deliver on what they've promised. So from that perspective, it's been very helpful to me that I've literally, not only am I the orchestra conductor, but I've played almost every single instrument in the orchestra in, a variety of roles that I've played. I also work with a number of portfolio companies of my hedge fund clients where they told me, well, we need you to go fix these companies. And so it's anticipating what can go wrong, and making sure you put all the measures in place to make sure they don't go wrong, or in the case they do go wrong, exactly how you're going to, address those. The other one is working with, who will be conducting your clinical study, right? So that's very, very important. Not all CROs are created equal. We ran a full bid process with about 8, 9 CROs. And there was really a very broad differential in terms of the quality and the pricing and everything else. And often when you work with the big CROs as a startup company, you're not going to get their A-plus team. And there's going to be constant turnover. And unless you know what you're doing, you have internal people who can oversee the process, they will hand you off your data and then you're on your own, essentially. There are overcharges, this, and that. So we were exceptionally fortunate that we are now partnered with Duke Clinical Research Institute. They will be conducting our phase 3 study in about 120 centers in the US and another country in Brazil. Majority of centers, of course, will be in the US. And it's they provide really end-to-end solution and exceptionally high quality. We're working with their A++ team. They choose you, you don't choose them in the sense that they only get involved with medicines that can improve the standard of care or establish a new standard of care, which is the case with our medicine, but also has a very high likelihood of success because it's a reputational risk for them, otherwise. So they managed to optimize our study, clinical study, phase 3 clinical study in a way that now we can enroll about 50% more patients at a 50% less cost that we were offered by other big CROs. Of course, they're an academic research organization. So when it's time to market the drug, opinion leaders, peer-to-peer marketing, you absolutely cannot put it's going to be highly, highly valuable. But also, they're really truly your partners. They also work with you on regulatory filings. They work with you on getting this into the clinical practice guidelines, which recently changed. It used to be reviewed every 4 to 5 years, and now it's being reviewed every year. So, within 6 months after approval, our medicine might end up being in the clinical practice guidelines as the only medicine being indicated for use in this indication.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Anna.
Of course.
You, I guess Saghmos, it might also be preparing for future expansion into maybe other indications beyond PCI, and I was curious if you could maybe touch on that for a moment.
Sure, absolutely. So the initial indication that we selected was selected for a variety of reasons, both ease of contact, speed of conduct, but also it's a very homogeneous patient population in terms of their risk once you start selecting patients with pre-existing kidney disease. But the what we expect is that once that our medicine is approved for that indication, physicians and hospitals alike, providers alike, tell us that they'll be using it more broadly without necessarily having to conduct additional studies because the pathophysiology is the same, whether you're using contrast dye for a PCI procedure, for a CT scan with contrast dye, diagnostic procedure, or for a valve replacement procedure, the pathophysiology is exactly the same. In all of those cases, the contrast dye goes out through the kidneys and it does damage to the kidneys, especially in patients who have pre-existing kidney disease because the toxin is stuck there for much longer, sometimes for weeks at a time.
Excellent. What advice would you give, I guess, maybe anything that we haven't touched on anyway, advice would you give to biotech startups that are seeking funding or strategic research partnerships, obviously DCRI with you all, but any advice that you would offer those on the call that may be seeking to follow in similar paths?
Sure. I would say a couple of things. Number one, follow first principles. Just do what gives the greatest likelihood of success for your product, from the type of preclinical studies you do to the type of clinical studies you do, the kinds of endpoints you select along the way. And then maybe I want to touch on that. So one of the questions I often get asked is like, why does our drug have such a high likelihood of success, including that of regulatory approval? Well, because the primary endpoint that will always go by the FDA without a squeak is something that helps the patient, affects how the patient or measures how the patient feels, functions, and survives, right? So you often see companies insisting that they're what they think of a biomarker or a surrogate endpoint, which the FDA doesn't accept as such. They're insisting that they should go ahead with that. And I won't mention any names, but there were some recent examples in the past few years. They go all the way through phase 3. They've just spent hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars, only to FDA come back and say, well, we told you this wasn't a probable endpoint, right? So everything has to be done with the mindset of how do I increase the likelihood of success. I mean, the other one is do not take no as an answer. It's just feedback at that point in time for those sets of circumstances with those people. I can tell you when we first started the company, everyone said, cardiac, renal, what are you thinking? Like an asset, God forbid, right? Everyone was into platforms at the time. But now cardiovascular renal metabolic is one of the hottest areas. Every major pharma is either in it or is getting into it. But unfortunately, again, and we had this discussion before this call, Dawn, there's this just sort of like bubble effect. Everyone jumps on the same bandwagon, I mean, now everyone and their cousin is developing obesity drugs. And at some point, doctors, insurance companies, and the insurance companies are already, tightening up their bolts, saying like, no, 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 you got to have not just obesity, but diabetes. And by the way, we're also going to raise the BMI. So economy is by definition the study of scarce resources. There are not unlimited resources in the world or in the US. So everyone's jumping on that bandwagon now. And the cardiovascular renal metabolic is, up and coming. It's becoming, very, very hot. But that's the other reason, going back to what I mentioned about the primary endpoint, our primary endpoint is clinically exceptionally meaningful. It has shown, our drug has shown to reduce death, to reduce heart attacks, hospitalizations for cardiac or renal reasons, and acute kidney failure. And all of those are clinically very meaningful. So if there is a competitor that tries to come down the road, well, they need to show impact on all of those. And unless you have another cardiac drug, which there isn't one because we've looked, then we will be the only game in town.
That's a fascinating path, Anna. It really truly is. So finally, let me ask you, how can any listeners connect with you or learn more about Saghmos Therapeutics?
Absolutely. So it's my email is very simple. It's Anna@saghmos.com. It's SAGHMOS.com. And I'm also available on my mobile. US area code 1-914-522-3885. And this is our mission, this is our passion, and we are looking forward to bringing this life-saving medicine to patients.
Absolutely, Anna. We're looking forward to seeing you and your team do that. That wraps
Thank
up
you.
this episode of Executive Insights for Life Sciences Innovators. I appreciate everyone tuning in. I hope you found today's conversation valuable. And if you enjoyed the discussion, please be sure to leave a review and share it with your network. Finally, please also mark your calendar for April 11th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time with Ayla Anik, the CEO of In Vivo Sciences. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you